Good morning there, channel members. This is one of two videos that I need to make to get that incentivized program from YouTube. So the first one is going to be a little bit of bio, a little bit more kind of background story of all these kitties. So this is Whiskers Maximus, aka Max, who you all know and love. His backstory actually is a little bit of a sad story. Not him himself, but we lost a tuxedo called the Little Boy back in 2015. He died of feline leukemia. Very unexpectedly. So, about 3 months after the little boy passed away, we were fostering with a group and we were at an adoption event and we saw little Maximus here. Who had very giant whiskers at the time. His whiskers are still kind of big now, but very, very large whiskers, hence the name Whiskers Maximus. And we just kind of fell in love with him for the spot. Now, I don't want to say that he was filling a hole, but maybe he was, because we just lost a tuxedo. So we wound up adopting Maximus. We were thinking about adopting his brother, but at the time we already had like 5 cats, I think. So that's just a little bit of story, a little backstory of how Whiskers Maximus came to our fold. He was very loving from the beginning. He was much more rambunctious and playful, not playful, but free-spirited until Yoda came around and turned him into the old man that he is now. Alright, on to the next one here in a second. This here is little old Rosemary. I know you all love and know Rosemary. I think she is definitely a favorite of many. We don't know too much of her backstory. Of course, I will retell her story, though, how she came into our lives. One day, her quote-unquote owner dropped her off trying to euthanize her. The hospital that I was working at said, no, this is a perfectly healthy cat. Besides having a thyroid issue and being deaf, we cannot euthanize this cat. So she kind of became a hospital cat. The other members of the hospital said they were going to take her on, or try to. It never happened due to whatever reason. So one day, we were going to move out of the area, but I asked the hospital staff, can I take Rosemary on? And they said, absolutely. We know that you'll provide her a good, loving home. She has been with us for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years. And she's actually, this morning, I've been trying to pill her, but she's been playfully running underneath the bed. Sometimes she is good with her pillings, and sometimes she likes to avoid them, of course. So, but a little bit backstory of Rosemary. And she's like, you're not going to pill me this morning. And I'm like, Rosemary, yes, I am. Alright, on to the next one. Next up, we have Kit here. Kit was our only adult foster. Her family that was fostering her before we fostered her had to go on a vacation. They were working with her because they believed that she was either neglected or abused when she was a little bit younger. So we took her on. She was very shy in the beginning. We put her in a room by herself. In those first few days to weeks, she would barely come out to visit us. But, we just kept at it. We kept on being by her, around her. Eventually, she would start coming out, wanting some attention, just kind of peeking her head out, saying, are you humans going to be good to me? Are you going to be nurturing to me? And over a period of months or so, she finally became more loving and trusting, and now she is probably the kitty that wants the most attention out of the 9. She also does have a little one called Caboodle. We never met. So as far as we know, she is the only one of these 9 cats that actually had any offspring. So that's a little bit more about Kit, and we'll go on to the next one here next. Of course, most of you know Zelda here. She is our oldest. She will be 20 here come January. But her backstory is, back in Arizona, before we moved to North Carolina, a cousin and an aunt of mine had this kitty cat, and they also had kind of an abusive boyfriend slash husband, I guess. Not a good situation. They lived kind of in a trailer, and one day the man, quote unquote, kicked her out of the house, and she was living underneath the trailer. We got wind of it, and at the time we had 2 other kitties named Kitty and Kitten, 2 of the original 3. So we went over, we talked to my aunt and my cousin about it. I said, can we take this kitty on? They said, go for it, give it a try. So we got there, we opened up our car door, we got Zelda out, and she hopped right out from underneath the trailer, and she hopped right into the car. And ever since then, she has been a mainstay of our kitties, and she is the last of the original Arizona cats. Obviously, we plan on moving back to Arizona, and it'd be really cool if she still is with us in this form, so she can make it back home, her original state. On to the next one. The baby here, Pandora in the back, which I'll get to next, she is probably one of the youngest kittens that we've had. We got her when she was about 6 weeks old or so. Little backstory about her. Back when I was working in physical therapy, we had a patient come to us, come to me and to my manager, who was also a very big cat lover, cat parent, and said that they had these trio of kittens and would be interested in adopting them, taking them. And I'm like, yeah. And I decided to take the baby, the calico. My manager took her brother. I can't remember the name at the moment. It was not a calico, though. It was like just a tabby. So that's a little bit of a backstory. She was a fuzzy little baby. My wife did not know anything about it, so one day when I brought her home, my wife got home later. She was working in a building at the time, not at home, and she walks in the door and she sees this little fuzz ball of eyeballs and a tail. Falls in love with her, of course, and the rest is history. So a little backstory of the baby, and I'm going to get Pandora over there next. Pandora here has a very interesting backstory. I was again working in that same physical therapy place, PT place, where the baby came around. We adopted her as a very young kitten. Pandora was already an adult cat. She was about probably 2 or 3. And she was living with a PT who worked there and his wife. And they were going to move, though, out to Colorado. And they knew that we were big cat fans, my wife and I. And I said, they asked me, could I take Pandora on, or at least to try? And I'm like, sure. Now, a little backstory about Pandora. She was what was called like a donor cat, a lab cat, in one of the local colleges here. She would donate her blood to help cats who need like blood transfusions and things like that. So she had an interesting life growing up, living basically kind of in a university as a donor cat. So that's a little bit of Pandora, and all that's left is Tang and Tiny, who I'll get to in a moment. This is obviously Yoda. He is another one of the favorites, I would say. Yoda's a very rambunctious little boy. Now, his little backstory, when a few years ago we were fostering, about 7 years ago, we were fostering a set of 6 kittens. Wild kittens, very wild, very rambunctious, messy. Ironically, though, Yoda was very quiet. He had very big ears as a baby. He still does now. Unbeknownst to me, though, my wife secretly, I guess the whole time, was thinking of adopting Yoda. So he was one of our first foster fails. Not really a fail, per se, but that's kind of a little backstory. He came from a group of 6. He was very quiet and shy, and now he's a loudmouth that we all know and love. So that's a little bit about Yoda. This is Tiny, the little goofball, the little bowling ball as we often call her. Her backstory, along with her brother, but I'll tell them separately, is 2 foster sets ago. We were fostering her and 4 of her siblings, so there were 5 altogether. She was a very wild little child growing up, very scrawny, and now she's kind of chunky. Had a ton of energy. But we wound up adopting her and her brother Tang. We actually had just had 3 cats pass away in 6 months. So maybe a part of the healing process, we wound up adopting her, Tang, and her brother. And I'm going to get her brother in a second here. And last but not least, of course, we have Mr. Tang here. He and his sister, Tiny, like I was saying in the previous video, they were adopted at the same time. They came with a group of 5 wild little children. But we did have an orange tabby named Norman, who unfortunately passed away when those three cats passed away of heart failure, congestive heart failure. So in a way, again, not to replace anybody, but we felt like, orange tabbies are very cool, very mellow, and we fostered a few orange tabbies before. They were always very cool. So we wound up foster failing him and his sister, Tiny. So that is it. I appreciate you watching.